Ever get the feeling like we're living in a world uh, built on like edited versions of the truth?
Hmm.
Like how much of what we think we know about people is
Yeah.
based on what they tell us
Right.
versus what they actually do?
It is fascinating how often we rely on self-reported data
Right.
to understand human behavior,
Yeah.
when really our actions often speak louder
Oh, yeah.
than our words.
And that's where today's deep dive comes in.
Okay.
We're looking at Seth Stephens-Davidowitz's book, Everybody Lies,
Mm-hmm.
which dives into the sometimes surprising,
Yeah.
sometimes uncomfortable world of big data and what it reveals about us.
Yeah.
We've got a summary of the book ready to go, so
Right.
buckle up.
This book really flips the script on how we think about human behavior.
Mm.
It forces us to confront the gap between our carefully crafted public image
Yeah.
and, well, the messier reality of our private thoughts and actions.
So Stephens-Davidowitz kicks things off with this idea that, yep, you guessed it,
Yeah.
everybody lies.
Everybody lied.
And he's not just talking about those little white lies we tell to spare someone's feelings.
Right.
He's arguing that we constantly present a slightly polished version of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
even when we think we're being totally honest.
Think about it.
Yeah.
How many times have you filled out a survey
Oh, yeah.
and maybe fudged the truth a little bit?
Totally.
We all want to appear a certain way,
Okay,
even
no,
if it's anonymous.
He uses this really interesting example about condom usage.
Okay.
Researchers asked people how often they use condoms,
Hmm.
and the results were,
Uh-huh.
well, let's just say the math didn't quite add up.
Okay.
Men claim to be using way more condoms than women, which obviously raised some eyebrows.
But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
When they compared these self-recorded numbers to actual condom sales figures,
Oh, wow.
it turned out both genders had overestimated their usage.
Oh, really?
So even in anonymous surveys,
Wow.
we're still trying to present ourselves in a certain light.
So how much can we really trust self-reported data? And what does this tell us about how we view ourselves
Uh-huh.
versus our actual actions?
This tendency to present ourselves favorably,
Yeah.
what researchers call social expectations bias,
Okay.
goes way beyond personal matters like sex.
Uh-huh.
We see it in things like political polling,
Right.
where people might be hesitant to admit who they're really voting for,
Mhm.
especially if it goes against social norms
Yeah.
or their perception of what's acceptable.
This reminds me of how Stephens-Davidowitz analyzed Google searches
Okay.
during the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
Right.
Remember how the polls had Hillary Clinton in the lead, but then Trump won?
It turns out a lot of Trump voters weren't openly expressing their support,
Interesting.
possibly because they felt their views were unpopular or
Yeah.
might be seen as offensive. And when we look at the book's analysis of things like racist Google searches,
Mhm.
it becomes clear that there's often a huge gap
Yeah.
between what people say publicly
Yeah.
and what they're actually thinking and feeling privately. This all points to the idea that relying solely on what people tell us,
Right.
whether in surveys or everyday conversations,
Yeah.
can give us a very skewed picture of reality.
So does this mean we should just toss out common sense and intuition altogether?
Right.
I mean, what about all that advice we get from older generations?
Mm-hmm.
Like, say, dating advice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole find a nice girl, not too pretty kind of wisdom.
It's interesting you bring that up
Yeah.
because Stephens-Davidowitz actually talks about getting that exact kind of well-meaning advice
Well,
from his grandma,
from his grandma.
but then he contrasts it with, get this Facebook data.
Wait, Facebook data can tell us about good relationships.
Believe it or not, yes.
Hmm.
The data suggests that couples who maintain some separate social circles
Okay.
tend to have stronger relationships.
Interesting.
It challenges the traditional notion
Yeah.
that couples should do everything together to stay connected.
Wow. I'm already seeing how big data can make us question those assumptions.
Right.
We often take for granted.
Yeah.
I bet everyone listening has gotten some advice
Mm-hmm.
that sounded good in theory,
Yeah.
but didn't really pan out in real life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a key takeaway here.
Yeah.
It's important to be open to challenging conventional wisdom and
Mhm.
embracing new perspectives,
Yeah.
even if they come from unexpected sources like, well, Facebook data.
Huh.
But speaking of big data,
Yeah.
the book goes on to highlight its real power.
Okay.
It's not just about debunking myths. It's about revealing a whole new understanding of ourselves and the world.
So tell me more about this power.
Okay.
How does big data actually work its magic?
Stephens-Davidowitz breaks down the power of big data into 4 key aspects.
Okay.
First, it allows us to think way outside the box
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to the types of data we collect.
Yeah.
We're not just talking surveys and questionnaires anymore.
Right.
Now we're looking at everything from our physical bodies and the words we use
Wow.
to even the images we share.
That's a huge shift.
It is.
It's like we've gone from reading a few scattered pages
Right.
to having access to an entire library of information about human behavior.
Exactly. This opens up so many possibilities.
Yeah.
We can now analyze things that were previously considered impossible to measure,
Right.
like facial expressions or the subtle nuances in the way people use language.
It reminds me of that story in the book about Jeff Cedar,
Oh, yeah.
the guy who used horse body data to predict race winners.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah.
Cedar basically turned the horse racing world upside down.
Uh-huh.
He realized that by analyzing things like the size of a horse's spleen
Wow.
or the shape of their hooves,
Really?
he could spot patterns that correlated with their performance.
And the old school racing experts thought he was crazy, right?
Did it?
But his horses started winning like crazy.
Yeah.
It totally challenged the traditional reliance on pedigree and expert opinion.
It's a perfect example of how big data can uncover hidden connections
Mm-hmm.
and lead to breakthroughs that wouldn't have been possible with traditional methods.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the second power of big data.
Okay.
Its ability to reveal patterns and correlations that we simply wouldn't notice otherwise.
Right.
With these massive data sets, we can start to see links between seemingly unrelated things and gain a much deeper understanding of how the world works.
So it's like connecting the dots on a massive scale.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's the third power,
Yeah.
which is the ability to conduct what are called randomized experiments.
Okay.
Imagine being able to test out different ideas or interventions in the real world
Right.
with a level of precision that was never possible before.
So like those A/B tests you see online, but on a much larger scale.
Exactly. This is incredibly valuable in fields like medicine and marketing.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to test the effectiveness of a new drug
Right.
or marketing campaign with much greater certainty.
And finally, there's the fourth power of big data, which Stephens-Davidowitz calls its honesty.
Mm-hmm.
It's like big data doesn't care about our opinions or biases.
Right.
It just presents the facts no matter how uncomfortable they might be.
It's like holding a mirror up to ourselves, warts and all, and
Yeah.
this unfiltered view of reality can be challenging.
Right.
But it's also incredibly valuable because it forces us to confront our assumptions
Yeah.
and ultimately make better decisions.
But hold on.
Yeah.
It can't all be sunshine and roses, right?
Right.
I mean, big data has to have some limitations, too.
It does.
We can't just blindly trust the numbers, can we?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges is what's called the curse of dimensionality.
Okay.
It's like having a million pieces of a puzzle but no picture to guide you.
Oh.
You might find pieces that seem to fit together,
Right.
but they don't actually mean anything.
So with so much data, it's easy to get lost in the noise
Exactly.
and find connections that aren't really there.
Exactly. And another key limitation is that while big data can measure what people are doing,
Mm-hmm.
it can't always explain why they're doing it.
Right.
It can't capture the full complexity of human motivations and emotions.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
It's like big data can tell me that I buy a certain type of coffee every morning,
right.
but it can't explain why I prefer that brand.
Exactly.
Or what emotions it evokes for me.
So it's crucial to remember that big data is a tool.
Yeah.
And like any tool, it needs to be used thoughtfully and responsibly.
For sure.
We can't just blindly trust the numbers
Right.
without considering the context and acknowledging its limitations.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between the power of data
Absolutely.
and the wisdom of human understanding.
It's about using big data to inform our decisions,
Yeah.
not dictate them. And
Yeah.
that's what makes this whole conversation so fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
We're learning to navigate this new world where we have access to more information than ever before.
Yeah. It really does make you think, where does all this leave us?
Yeah.
What have we learned from this deep dive into the
Mhm.
world of everybody lies?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we need like a healthy dose of humility when it
Mhm.
comes to understanding ourselves and the world.
Yeah.
It's so easy to assume we've got things figured out.
Right.
But this deep dive has really highlighted how our intuition can be flawed,
Uh-huh.
our perceptions biased,
All right.
and our understanding of human behavior incomplete.
It's like that saying, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
And big data gives us this incredible opportunity
Mm.
to challenge our assumptions,
Yeah,
broaden our perspectives,
Right.
and uncover hidden truths that were previously obscured.
for sure. But as we've discussed, it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
We have to use this data wisely, ethically, and always with a critical eye.
Absolutely.
We can't forget that behind all those data points are real people.
Yes.
With their own unique stories, motivations, and emotions.
Big data can reveal fascinating patterns and trends, but it can't capture the full richness and complexity of the human experience.
It can't.
That's where human insight, empathy, and critical thinking become even more important.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between the power of data and the wisdom of human understanding.
Right.
We need to be thoughtful about how we interpret the data, recognizing its limitations and considering the broader context.
This deep dive has definitely changed the way I think about the information I encounter every day.
Okay.
I'm going to be much more conscious of my own biases and more willing to question those truths that we often take for granted.
And that's the real beauty of Everybody Lies.
Yeah.
It's not just about presenting a bunch of data.
Right.
It's about sparking a conversation, encouraging us to think critically, and ultimately empowering us to navigate this increasingly data-driven world with more awareness and understanding.
It really makes you wonder, what other hidden truths are out there just waiting to be discovered?
Right.
What mysteries of human behavior are we going to unlock with this new way of looking at the world?
The possibilities are truly endless.
Yeah.
We're only just beginning to scratch the surface of what big data can teach us about ourselves and the world around us, and that's what makes this field so exciting.
So to everyone listening, if you're intrigued by the idea of challenging your assumptions and exploring the hidden side of human behavior, I highly recommend checking out Everybody Lies by Seth Stephens-Davidowitz.
It's a good one.
It's a fascinating and thought-provoking read. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep an open mind.